Hey folks, this is the 10-minute Bible study. Glad you are joining, assuming that some of you are joining. And I'm coming a little bit early because today we have the Bible study happening in person, which is just fantastic. Super excited about that. So I need to finish earlier so that I can move from one place to another. So the 10-minute Bible study is now going to be happening like it's between 6 and 6:15, and it's in preparation for an in-person Bible study at 7. Now, we are still going to have a Zoom option, so if you want to, peek in on what's going on in the Bible study, you can do that. I'm planning to Zoom that. Haven't Zoomed from that room before, at least not recently, but I think the internet connection is going to be good enough to do that. Not sure how that's going to work, so bear with us tonight. But we're excited because we're going to, there's an in-person option tonight, and I'm excited about that. I don't even know if anybody's coming, but I'm excited about it. So we're continuing through the book of Matthew, and last week we sort of finished up a section where Matthew is trying to show that things are getting more and more tense, like Jesus is experiencing more and more opposition to his teaching, and it kind of ends with his family coming and trying to put a stop to him, and him saying, hey, wait a minute, guys, my brothers and sisters, my real family is the family of God, and that if my biological family is opposed to me, then, too bad for them, kind of thing. This is chapter 12, verse 46. While he was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers were standing outside waiting to talk to him. Someone told him, look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak with you. And we know from other sources that they were trying to get him to shut up. But to the one who told him this, Jesus replied, verse 48, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And pointing to his disciples, the people who were following him, who were trying to live by his teachings, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. So it sounds harsh, but it is kind of the culmination and the logical conclusion of, how bad it can really be, like in terms of the opposition and the division. Now, Matthew 13 moves into a series of parables that Jesus tells, and I don't want to lose the connection between the fact that there's more and more opposition, more and more resistance. I don't want to lose the connection between that and all of a sudden now he's teaching in parables. Because before he hasn't been teaching in parables, at least not much. I'm not sure if at all in Matthew, now that I'm thinking about it. I think this is the first parable that we've come across in the book of Matthew. I didn't think to look that up. But when there's opposition, a parable is an interesting way to teach because it kind of bypasses an initial defensiveness. So you can say things in parables that you can't say sort of in didactic ways. It bypasses an initial defensiveness. It's open-ended, so the listener has to draw their own conclusions. And so for a lot of different reasons, a parable is a very clever way of teaching when there's opposition. And I think that there's a lesson actually for modern churches in that, especially in places where there's opposition to Christianity, where people might have been hurt by things that Christians have done, where people are resistant intellectually, that parables and story are a very powerful way to teach that might be able to overcome or go around some of the resistance we may feel. So anyway, those are some thoughts along those lines. Let me read the story. I'm not going to read the conclusion to the story. I'm just going to read through, I believe, verse 13 is kind of my plan, or maybe even just through 9. So that same day, when he even encountered opposition from his own biological family, that same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by a lake, pondering how did he get himself into this? No. And such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and he sat in it. The sitting down is a posture of authority in the ancient Jewish world. So, when he taught on the Sermon on the Mount, he sat down and taught, and everybody else presumably may have been standing, but it's a position of authority. He sat down in the boat while all the people stood on the shore. And then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they became withered, and they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. And still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And then we find out shortly after that the disciples aren't sure they have ears. They aren't sure that they understand. There are a lot of things that we can talk about in a parable like that, and we may talk about them some tonight. I'll put the credentials for the Zoom call in both YouTube and also on Facebook as soon as I end this broadcast. But one of the interesting questions that was raised for me is someone pointed out this is good news and bad news for the church. It's good news and bad news for Christians because it's telling us that on the one hand, as you're out sharing the good news about God, you're going to get different reactions. Some people are going to be enthusiastic, but they're not going to hang around. Some people are going to reject you outright. And so not every seed that you sow, not every attempt that you make to talk to a neighbor or a friend or a coworker or a family member, not every attempt is going to produce fruit. In fact, not only is that true, but the majority of attempts are in one way or another going to be rejected. And I know that that's hard for me as a pastor. Like, if I work with 10 people, maybe 2 of them kind of get it, right? Some reject outright, and that's fairly easy to deal with. Some, get excited and then get burned, like some of the seeds did, and that's painful. And some just get choked out, by cares and other things that are going on in life, and that's painful as well from the perspective of the church or from the perspective of me as a Christian. And I wonder how you feel about that, and I think that's worth talking about. Like, what do we feel like, and how do we manage those feelings as Christians? And then, but it's also good news, because what this parable is also saying is that although there's a lot of rejection and there's a lot of resistance and there's a lot of falling away, that as we sow seeds in the community, as we talk to neighbors and friends and family members and coworkers, that there will be some in whom the gospel will really take root, and their lives are going to be changed, and they're going to really have a vital relationship with God and probably spread that to other people in their lives as well. And so that's really good news, because sometimes you just feel like you're just pounding on the door over and over and over again, never getting any results. And what that's telling us is, no, there will be some fruit if you're faithful in sowing seeds. And so those are just a couple of ideas that I wanted to toss out there from this parable that I believe that we can talk about tonight. So if you're watching this and you have questions about the passage, feel free to ask me, either in direct messages or in the comments. And for anyone who would like to, if you're close by, join us at 7. We're in the chapel. If you're not close by and you want to just check it out on Zoom, feel free to Zoom in. And I'm going to put the credentials for the Zoom up here in just a moment. So God bless.